So through me, he attracted other Western patients, and they would come to him, and he would treat them in his home. Well, he also had a father his father lived in Fresno, and would go up to his father in Fresno to visit, and he would have a line of patients outside waiting for him. And one day it attracted the police, and he was arrested for practicing medicine without a license, taken off in handcuffs. What showed me was that we needed to pursue the legal aspects of getting licensed in order to practice this medicine, because I was more and more involved in medicine. I'd follow him on house calls. I'd do all of these things.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Geological, the podcast that curates East Asian medicine and methods through the power of conversation. I've had people come into my clinic, you probably have as well, and they ask, do I have to believe in acupuncture for it to work? It's not an unreasonable question, especially if you didn't grow up with an influential adult showing up with needles or herbs when you were feeling poorly as a kid. For me, acupuncture is a technology. Do certain things in a particular way in a given context, and you can expect a reasonable range of repeatable results. It's not that different from cooking, teaching a class, or learning to partner dance. There are steps and principles, but with practice, you can develop a knack. It doesn't require belief. It simply takes observation and practice. If it was as simple as having a belief, then I suspect all kinds of ills could be cured with the right mindset. But the problem with belief is that it might have very little to do with the reality of how things are, which is why we have mind tools like the scientific method. It's why there are Zen koans, Sufi Nasruddin stories, chemistry, and Newtonian physics. It helps to have ways to fact-check our fancy and separate ideas from actual reality. Belief is a strange thing. Part perception, part chemistry, part creation story, and part security blanket. It's not something we are reasoned into. And so I increasingly doubt that it's something we can be reasoned out of. Beliefs are durable and elastic. They snap back in funny ways when compressed or stretched. They have a psychoemotive homeostasis that makes them impervious to rational thought. I used to think I was a pretty open-minded person. And then I started practicing Chinese medicine. And that put me in front of all kinds of people that I'd otherwise have never met or had a conversation with. And especially after I moved to the middle of the country, St. Louis, Missouri, I found myself working with a much wider range of people than I saw when I lived in Seattle. I had to learn to keep my mouth shut and ears open when people wearing hats with particular slogans would walk through my door. I had to keep an inquisitive heart when a patient would go on a rant about the kind of person I was, but they didn't know it. Over the years, I've had to learn to settle my emotions and lean on being inquisitively empathetic to understand the person in front of me, because my job was not to correct their beliefs. It was to help them with a problem that had been dogging them. Over time, practicing acupuncture has helped to make me a little less reactive and a little more inquisitive. For sure, it's made me more empathetic. And I'm not talking about empathy as being able to feel the feelings of someone else. I'm talking about the empathy of being able to hear what they fear that I don't fear, of having a bit of capacity to not get angry when I hear about what they want that I actually think is a bad idea, and being able to tolerate hearing about what angers them that's actually reassuring to me. In the past few months, with the political cycle being what it is, I have had the good fortune to sit with, listen to, and be with folks from across the spectrum of ideology and belief. And again, because I'm here to help, not dismiss or correct, I've had the good fortune to better understand people from their own point of view. Here's what I found. Most folks are pretty good. They love their families and are concerned for their community. They actually want to see the world be a better place. They're not stupid for having the perspectives they do. They're not enlightened either. On all sides of the political spectrum, I've heard frustration and, man, does that tie up the liver and send the gallbladder on a rant. On all sides, I hear about love and hate. There's some pretty different ways of imagining how the world could be a better place. Some want to place the Ten Commandments in schoolhouses. Others, they want the gender unicorn. Really, when you think about it, they aren't that different. Both are emblems of belief and identity, and the funny thing is that at the core, it's about a set of principles that are aimed at living a good life by prescribing how we ought to be with each other. I'm not saying all beliefs are equal and worth respecting. There are things I stand for, and certainly things I stand against. But in the space of clinic, when I'm working with people who are there for my help, when there's a bit of suffering I'm being asked to help with, I do my level best to set aside judgments and listen for how I might be helpful using the tools of our trade. Over time, I think it has given me a little more capacity to be with others who I'd otherwise dismiss out of hand, because I'm no different than anyone else when the order and structure of my worldview is challenged or threatened. It's not easy seeing beyond the puzzle box of belief. The sense of belonging and righteousness, they're delicious. But there's something I think helps me to practice medicine better when I'm not thrown to the winds of my own distress and cobbled together virtue when I'm working with another. I do better work when I can see who somebody is without needing them to be any different than who they are. Who we are, how we work with others, that is something I suspect comes through the practice of sitting with people and seeking to understand with discernment. It's one of the benefits of clinical practice that I found has tempered my tendency toward being judgmental and a bit self-righteous to boot. The sacred space of clinic has been reliable in pointing out to me when I'm being unhelpfully sarcastic, flippant, or wanting to push an ideological bent. Practicing medicine, the work itself is a kind of cultivation. I'm delighted in this History Series conversation with Stephen Rosenblatt to discuss the journey of becoming a doctor. Stephen was in Southern California in the very early days when studying martial arts or Tai Chi was a gateway into learning medicine. At the beginning, there are often wildly fantastic opportunities because there's not that much history or precedent. And so you've got a shot at making history. But beyond that, live a life of extraordinary possibility. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out their new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AcuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do? Julie Bear Don't Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lyle, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com. And where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AcuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit acufastneedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
Stephen Rosenblatt, welcome to Qiological.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Here we are in the Wayback Machine, as you mentioned before we went on.
Well, we're about to jump into the Wayback Machine. You know, right now it's, as we're speaking, it's November 2024, but...
Yes, who would believe it?
I know, it's kind of wild, isn't it? As soon as it's going to be 2025.
In any minute.
And then it just goes on and on. But what I'm interested in is, look, you've been doing acupuncture for a long time.
Yes.
A really long time. I want to jump into that Wayback Machine, dial back to when you first heard about acupuncture. Like, what was the landscape of the culture? What did your life look like? What were the issues of the day? And why on God's green earth would acupuncture seem like a good idea? Like, how did you hear about it? And like, what caught you up in, I want to know more about that stuff.
Well, let me start a little further back than that. When I was young, my family always considered me the doctor. I was always pointed out, oh, he's the doctor.
He's going to be the doctor.
He's going to be a doctor.
He's going to be the doctor.
Yeah, he is the doctor.
He is the doctor.
He is the doctor.
How did that happen? How did you?
It just happened in my family. I don't know. I don't think there was any specific event. But my parents were just kind of foresighted. They just recognized my younger brother had talents that would make him a lawyer.
Okay.
And he's a lawyer to this day.
All right. Yeah.
The middle brother followed my father and became a pilot, went to the Air Force Academy. Father did, and flew the Blue Angels and flew all these flights. And,
oh, wow.
And then became a pilot for American Airlines for many years.
Blue Angels.
Well, whatever the...
That's pretty badass.
I don't know if that's the Air Force, whatever the Air Force flight.
It's the Navy.
Yeah.
Navy's Blue Angels, right?
Yeah, Navy's Blue. But he was Air Force. So whatever the corresponding Thunderbirds or whatever their flight team was, I don't remember offhand.
Yeah.
But he was part of that team.
Okay.
He went into he stayed in the Air Force and wanted to become an astronaut and followed that. He didn't make it because of his blood pressure was a little bit too high. And in those days, you had to be a perfect specimen. But anyway, that's a long story. So my parents were able to recognize in us very early traits and and predilections and things that we liked and disliked and how we grew up. And they recognized that they didn't force, but they pointed out to us that, this is, and it turned out to be true.
Yeah.
So I was always bent on the doctor. Well, I went to UCLA. I got involved in psychology. I got a master's degree working with autistic children. I was very interested in them. And then with autistic children, I got interested in pain control because I don't know if you know autistic children, but they self-mutilate. They beat their heads on walls and without feeling any pain, apparently. And so I got interested.
What's going on there?
How do we perceive pain?
How do we perceive pain?
And so I got involved in that. I was a graduate student, and I got involved in doing Tai Chi. A friend said, "Oh, you should learn this Tai Chi system." And so I went to Griffith Park, and Marshall Ho, who was a very influential Tai Chi teacher in Los Angeles at the time, he was teaching Tai Chi, and so I went to classes regularly. And one day I was doing Tai Chi in the park, and an old Chinese man happened to walk by. And he came up to me, and he had never seen, he had someone with him that spoke English. He didn't speak too much. He'd never seen a Westerner doing Tai Chi.
What's this white guy doing? Yeah.
Exactly. That was it. What's this with this white guy doing Tai Chi?
Is he lost? What's he doing here?
And we started talking, and it turned out that he lived in Chinatown in Los Angeles, and invited me to his house to have tea. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
And we had tea, and we had a great conversation. Turned out he was a world-renowned acupuncturist.
What year is this?
Now, this is 1969.
1969. Summer of Love.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
It was in the spring, I believe, of 69.
Mm-hmm.
So, I went to his house and we talked, and I liked him. And it turned out he was an acupuncturist. Now, I had never heard the word. Here I was, a graduate student, UCLA, finished my master's, or was in psychology.
Well, you're doing psychology. You're doing some Western science.
And I had never heard the word acupuncture. It just wasn't in the vocabulary of the Western world, really.
Right.
And so, he liked me and I liked him. And I said, well, let me learn more about this, since I was doing Tai Chi and involved. I said, well, let me learn more about this. So gradually I got interested and learned, and he kind of adopted me as his, what we call Lofan son. Now, Lofan is a word that means like gringo or someone outside the tradition or the culture. So I was his Lofan son, and he adopted me in this way and took me everywhere with him. So I followed him around. He was working only in Chinatown because those were the only people that understood or wanted acupuncture in those days.
They're the only ones who knew about it.
Yep, knew about it.
Yeah.
So through me, he attracted other Western patients.
Okay.
And they would come to him, and he would treat them in his home. Well, he also had a father who lived up in Fresno. His father lived in Fresno, and would go up to his father in Fresno to visit, and he would have a line of
waiting for him. Yeah.
Patients outside waiting for him. And one day it attracted the police, and he was arrested for practicing medicine without a license, taken off in handcuffs.
Were you there when that happened?
I wasn't there at that moment, but I got the call immediately.
You got the call, right.
And so we had to work legally. But at any rate, what showed me was that we needed to pursue the legal aspects of getting licensed in order to practice this medicine, because I was more and more involved in medicine. I'd follow him on house calls. I'd do all of these things.
Now, were you practicing at this point yourself, or you're still learning?
At one point in this learning process, a patient called up and said, listen, I have a problem. It would happen to be a trigeminal neuralgia problem. And his name was Ju Gim Shek. We called him Dr. Kim was our name for him, Dr. Kim, but he was Ju Gim Shek. And Dr. Kim said to me, here are the needles. You go to see this patient. And that was my first kind of graduation from being a student to now starting to practice under some supervision and such. And so I went and I treated these patients, this woman, for trigeminal neuralgia, and she responded very well. In fact, years later, she remained a patient of mine for many years until she passed away, and her husband until she passed away. And so this was my first treatment. This was 71 or so, 71.
Okay. So you've been studying with him for a few years at this point. What was that education like?
A few years, right? Well, it started out just meeting at his office and spending all day seeing him treat his patients and him talking to me between patients and explaining what was going on and what points and the needles and things of that sort.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, he decided that he wanted to do more of a classroom instruction for me. And he commissioned me with getting a group of students together.
Okay.
We had a translator by Marshall Ho, in fact, the Tai Chi teacher who acted as our translator, spoke very good English and Chinese. And Dr. Kim was learning better English as time went on. We basically taught him English as we were
Sure. As you were studying and
hanging out. And there was a group of us formed a classroom. And the classroom was in Los Angeles, and it was called Crossroads. And it was at a particular place in Los Angeles that had rooms and things. And Marshall Ho would teach Tai Chi there, and we would sit on mats, and he would lecture to us. And this would be several times a week, twice a week. We'd have formal lectures. So then we learned in a much more formal lecture format, the meridians and the points and the indications and all those things. By the way, it was called Crossroads of the World. I should be careful about. Cross of the World was the location of that. It's still there on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles.
Crossroads of the World. Now, the kind of medicine he was teaching you at that point, did it resemble TCM? Was it something else? What did that look like?
He was an old-time practitioner.
Uh-huh.
He fled China when the communists took over. He was threatened and was on the wrong side of the political spectrum.
Yep, got to get out of town.
And so he fled. So he wasn't really exposed to the TCM that started really with the communist regime. He was...
Right, so he's more like a Republican-era doc.
Exactly. It was a much earlier type of acupuncture. He was very well known in the field of acupuncture and would go around village to village when he was in China and practice. But he had to leave, took his family. Actually, his wife actually stayed, but he had to leave, took the children with him, and fled to Los Angeles and lived in Chinatown in Los Angeles. And so it was an earlier form of acupuncture. It was very...
Yeah, it was different.
Traditional, but not what we think of as TCM.
Yeah. How would you say it was different?
It was very intuitive. It was much more feeling. It was much more, looking at the patient. It was much more using the other methods of diagnosis, all the methods of tongue and the pulse and things of this sort. And, it was say, a very intuitive system. Now
And more palpation.
And yeah, it was on patients. And then, as I say,
I mean palpation, more.
And palpation, yes.
More touching, more sensing that way.
Exactly. And becoming the doctor. Now, let me just tell you an interesting story.
That's an interesting phrase, becoming the doctor. We'll come back to that in a minute.
Well, let me tell you an interesting story about that. When I first went to see him, this was, 69, and I had the full long hair and the full beard, which was required, of course, at those days, right? In the 60s.
That's right,
in California, right, in UCLA. So he looks at me, he's a very proper tie, dress shirt type of doctor, and he says, I think the second or third time I saw him, he looked at me just straight in the eye and said, "If you want to do the doctor, you must look the doctor." Right? If you want to be the doctor, you must look the doctor.
You must look the doctor.
I took it to heart. Next day, went home, cut my hair, shaved my beard.
Wow. Okay, that's a big...
Had to look the doctor.
That's actually a big thing in those days.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, that's a big step.
Because I was just a hippy-dippy.
That's commitment, dude.
Graduate student. And he said, if you want to do the doctor, you must look the doctor. And I tell that to my students. I tell them that to, people around me, that you have to look like the doctor. This is, if I was in Central Africa, I'd be wearing the proper feathers and beads and crystals or whatever a doctor in Central Africa might wear. So again, you've got to be appropriate for your environment. And that was one of the first things he taught me. because you are the doctor. So,
And I hear you say that, becoming the doctor. I mean, that just causes a whole realignment inside how I am, who I am, how I perceive things, how I interact with other people.
yes, it does. And it's
stepping into a whole kind of responsibility.
I was going to say responsibility is part of it, and part of it is acceptance, that you're accepting all of these things. I was joking with someone the other day. I said, the only people I spend most of my time with are sick and injured. Which,
It's interesting.
It just says something. I wasn't complaining about it, but it was just, that's the sort of the pattern of my life that took on that pattern from acupuncture, first days.
Yeah. Well, and you were there in the beginning with that.
Very, very beginning.
Psychology, working with autistic kids.
Yeah. It was always in that direction.
Your folks were right. You were drawn to this kind of work.
Parents. My mother is still alive at 101.
Wow.
So she's very long-lived too. At any rate, maybe too much aside here. I don't know. But so at one point, we decided that we had to get this legalized, that this was important enough that we had to bring it into what I say. My goal in life, maybe, or major part, is to bring acupuncture into the healthcare delivery system of America.
That's no small thing.
And that's where we started. It was no small thing. So we started in California. Which is,
yes, with your teacher in handcuffs.
Well, yes. And by the way, we got a law passed in California. We lobbied, we found lawyers, we lobbied the legislature. The first law passed was that acupuncture could be done in a medical school under doctor's supervision. And thus we started, and I was a UCLA graduate, thus we started the UCLA Acupuncture Center.
Okay.
It was in the medical school, as part of the medical school, under the Department of Anesthesiology.
It's medicine, right? We're in the medical trade. Okay.
Ron Katz was the head of the anesthesia department.
Now, why anesthesiology?
Because it was pain control. See, initially, acupuncture became popular through James Weston when he went to China and had operation surgery and used pain control, acupuncture for pain control afterward. So initially it was surgery being done under acupuncture, dental surgery being done under acupuncture. So it was pain control, and that's how it got into anesthesia.
That makes sense.
In that sense, yeah. So we were Department of Anesthesia, and we started a clinic. It happened to be in the psychology department, by the way, because we were in the psychology department.
You were using the resources you had at hand. Okay.
Exactly. We were using that. And we set it up, and it was a clinic, and we saw a lot of the Hollywood celebs and the rich and famous, because acupuncture by then, after James Weston became known, it was in the newspapers, it was out there, and then the law passed and the clinic opened at UCLA. I was the clinic director. David Bressler was the project director. We had different parts of us. Bill Prensky helped. So it was a group of us that formed this. I was the practitioner and ran the clinical aspect of it. And so it was...
And the glitterati wanted to... It's like, oh, here's this cool thing. And
exactly. And that helped us take our next steps, because the next step was to move it out of the medical school. So the next law that we got passed in California was that it could be done, but under with a referral from an MD. You had to have a written referral from an MD to practice. And so we still weren't licensed, but it was under the MD supervision in that sense.
Yeah, so you're becoming more and more
integrated into the system.
And acceptable.
Yeah. The next law, so I wasn't happy with that. So the next law was that set up licensing, and we didn't have to have doctors' supervision or recommendation. And the licensing law was in California was passed. I might be wrong on the date, but I think it was passed in 76, I think. And so that was the first license. It wasn't the first in the country. We did Oregon first. I was licensed in Oregon before this. Oregon was one of the first states. Actually,
Oregon was the first state to get licensure.
Nevada was the first state that licensed. I lectured in Nevada and spoke to the legislature.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary: raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But Here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code CHIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Okay, all right, hang on a second. Nevada, how did that work? That just seemed...
They had Lok Yi Gung was an acupuncturist that started treating people in Las Vegas. And as acupuncture became known, it was illegal. He lobbied the legislature. He brought us in from UCLA. We were running the UCLA clinic to, authenticate acupuncture and show that it can be done in a medical school. I was introduced on the floor of the legislature, met the governor of Nevada, did actual on-the-ground lobbying work, and it was passed. But they passed, part of the law was that you had to have been in practice 10 years, legally 10 years. So only the people from China or Asia were able to be licensed in these first 10 people. So we got hooked up with Oregon, and I went to Oregon and we lectured there and we talked to the legislature, met the governor again, did all the lobbying work. And Oregon was really the first state that had real licensing, take a licensing exam and get licensed acupuncture was Oregon. So I was licensed. I have license number 8 in Oregon. There was a group of about 10 of us. I was the only Westerner. Right. So I always say I'm the first Westerner license in the country.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
The other, about 10 of us in the group. So the other 9 were Asian. They have my teacher. Well, I'll tell you about going to Hong Kong in another minute. But
okay.
I brought over my teacher from Hong Kong. He has license number 7 in Oregon. This was Dr. So. At one point...
Oh, the Dr. So. Okay.
The Dr. So, yes. Well, at one point, my first teacher, Dr. Kim, said, it's time to teach you some more things. Let's go to Hong Kong. And this was in 72, yes.
I bet that was fun, wasn't it? Let's go to Hong Kong and learn some acupuncture.
Yep. And he enrolled me in the Hong Kong Acupuncture College. He got me in, and I studied.
Now, were you the first?
I was the first Westerner to study at Hong Kong Acupuncture College, yes. And the head of the college.
Now, did you have a translator? How did you do that?
Well, it was Hong Kong in those days was British. So English was well spoken. Everyone wanted to speak English to me. I couldn't even learn Chinese. They wouldn't tolerate it.
Well, they didn't really have Chinese. They had Cantonese anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a type of Chinese, but they didn't have Mandarin. Okay.
Yeah, it was Cantonese.
All right. So you could learn it in English, not a problem.
Poor English. It was, sometimes someone would translate and help me. But Dr. So spoke very good English. He was head of the Hong Kong Acupuncture College, started it in 1939. And had been running it. He was a well-known acupuncturist. Well, anyway, he was friends with Dr. Kim, my first teacher. So Kim brought me, and the tradition is you take your student and you give him to another teacher to finalize his training, like finishing school. So I already knew acupuncture,
Yeah.
to some degree. But here, Dr. So took me on as his close student. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. You get a foundation, you get some experience, somebody else gives you perspective.
Right, that's right. And Dr. So did. He had been doing it. He was sort of the grandfather. Well, anyway, we hit it off. He liked me very much. And while I was in Hong Kong, he said, listen, I've always wanted to finish my life in America, to spend my last days in America. Can you help me? I said, we'll work on it. I went back to Los Angeles. We worked on it through legal channels. We got him a distinguished person's visa to come into America. So he came. He lived with me, Dr. So Tin Yao. James was his Christian name, James Tin Yao So. He lived with me in Los Angeles, and we worked together at UCLA. I was running the UCLA in the pain clinic at UCLA, right. That's right. That's right.
In the pain clinic, doing the thing that you started. Okay.
And so he lived and we worked together. And at one point we got an offer to open another clinic in Boston. And so we decided to take it. We left the UCLA clinic in other hands. Other people took over at that point. And we went to Boston and started the acupuncture program in downtown Boston. And we lived together in Boston, in Kenmore Square, to be exact, in Boston. And we ran a clinic right in Kenmore Square. We had others around and surrounding, several clinics that would rotate around surrounding communities. And at one point, we decided to set up a school. It was called the James Stevens, Steve Rosenblatt, James Stevens Acupuncture School. Right. And it was taught in my Tai Chi studio in Boston. I had a little Tai Chi studio. By that time, I was teaching Tai Chi. I had been doing it long enough. And we had students, and they would sit on mats and boards, and we evolved a whole thing that could be taken down, and Tai Chi could be taught and put up again. And Dr. So and I taught. Dr. So went back to Hong Kong for a while to see his wife, who wasn't well, in the middle of this teaching course. And so I took over, and I would do the lecturing for this. At one point, after a couple of years, I decided I wanted to go back to UCLA and finish my PhD. I hadn't finished the PhD. I'd been involved in all these other activities. So I said, I've got to go back. I've got to finish my dissertation at UCLA. So he stayed.
Because you're going to be the doctor.
You were right. So he stayed. And he says, I'm too old to go back across the country again. I said, we're just taking an airplane. It's not like we're walking. But he felt he was settled in Boston. He wanted to stay there. And he finished his days in Boston.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he would come and visit me. So in Los Angeles, I set up California Acupuncture. I finished my doctorate. By the way, it was on electrophysiological changes at acupuncture points. So it was a acupuncture-based dissertation. I used EKG and EEG measures of changes reflected at the acupuncture point. So it's still out there. 3 parts of the dissertation have been published in different journals and such. So it was one of most of my published studies, at any rate.
Yeah. So what did you find in that research?
Interesting question. I don't know if you want to talk about it too much, but
I'm curious. I mean, this is like the very early. You're looking to see what kind of physiological changes.
Very early, our first research. Yeah, right. And this was the first PhD dissertation in this country done on acupuncture at a major university. Yeah, so my dissertation was in Department of Physiological Psych at UCLA. And basically, the title of my dissertation is Electrophysiological Change. What we found is that...
So what did you find?
The points themselves related to heart rate and breathing rate would reflect high and lower changes in the electrical output. And to go further in that, I trained a number of subjects to be able to raise and lower their heart rate by biofeedback. You can do that fairly readily. So I found that as they raised their heart rate, nothing put in, just raised their heart rate, there would be changes on the heart meridian, heart 7.
Oh, that's interesting.
As opposed to a placebo next to it. No change, right? Heart rate. Breathing rate, we changed breathing rate. We'd measure lung points. Lung points showed changes in electrophysiological potential at the points, but not at a placebo point. A placebo point was a point that is 2 centimeters away and not on any other meridian or any other point. We just called it a blank placebo point. That didn't show any physiological changes, yet the acupuncture point measured with electrodes on it showed physiological changes. It was an interesting study, and it wasn't, it was a passive study. That we didn't add anything. We didn't use needles. We didn't use electrostim. We didn't use lasers or anything. It was just training patients so that as the blood pressure, the heart rate went up, you would get changes on the heart meridian. As the heart rate went down, you get other changes. You get lower potential on the heart meridian points.
On the heart meridian points.
Only, isn't it? And breathing rate the same way we did on lung meridian.
That's really wild. Yeah.
So it was an interesting study, and I was awarded a PhD on this based on this.
How did you come? So I mean, this is fascinating. How did you come up with that idea? Because so often at least when I think of research, it's like, okay, we're going to put a needle in, we're going to see what it does. This is like the opposite of that.
Yeah, I didn't want to do anything. I wanted to do passive rather than an active stimulation. I wanted to do as the body changes, is it reflected in the meridians, right? Rather than, if you put a needle in, it stimulates nerves and stimulates all kinds. There was confounding things. Anyway, I had to fight with my doctoral I didn't really fight, but we had, an intense discussion in my final oral exam about how this dissertation, and I showed them exactly what was happening, and they said, "Congratulations, Dr. Rosenblatt." That's the tradition when you finish your oral PhD. They turn to you and say, "Congratulations, doctor. You made it, right?"
You made it.
So, at any rate, that was that story. So, so that was my doctoral dissertation at that point. But anyway, so I proceeded to do, acupuncture and built up patients. I started California Acupuncture College in Los Angeles. We developed a branch in Santa Barbara. We had a branch in San Diego, right here, and it became the Pacific College eventually. Eventually, I left, and the reason I left was it had been 20 years that I had been doing acupuncture, and I decided it was time to learn some new things. So I decided to go back to medical school, right? I was a PhD, Doctor of Oriental Medicine. So I said, no, let's learn some new things. Yes. So.
And now you're coming very full circle.
I said, listen, so I applied. I got into the American University of the Caribbean in Montserrat. The Caribbean, it was American University. It's based in New York, but it had its campus in the Caribbean. I got in there. I sold everything here, brought my family. I had 2 kids growing up, and went to Montserrat to study medicine. I had gone down there before just to check it out. My brother went with me, the pilot, went with me to check it out and make sure it was, a real thing. So, I was there a month, and Hurricane Hugo blew over the entire island, destroyed everything on this island. Cadavers, it was a cadaver lab. It's the first day of medical use. This is a month into it. Cadavers strewn all over the place. It was Hurricane Hugo. It was huge. We were then airlifted out of the island by the British Air Force. Flew in a transport plane, and a number of us were able to get on. My family got on. My kids, they were 10 and 5 at the time. At any rate, so we were refugees. The school then opened in Texas.
Oh, my goodness, that's a difference.
To finish that, they rented a Baptist college in Texas and took all the students there. We finished the first semester. They got new cadavers. They redid everything. It was amazing. At one point, I decided, I don't want to stay in Texas. I wanted to go back to the Caribbean, so I switched schools. They came and recruited me, actually, from Grenada. The school in Grenada, which is where I should have started in the first place, to tell you the truth. It's a much better school.
The universe has a way of course correcting us.
Yeah, that's right. Good point. So they recruited me. I left Texas, took the family. We went back to the Caribbean. We went to Grenada and got a house there and established ourselves. And I started my second semester then. I got credit for my first semester at this college in Grenada. Recruited me, gave me credit for that because I had finished it and finished the course and such. So I went to Grenada, and you spend 2 years on the island, then you go either back to the United States or you go to England for your clinical rotations. There's not enough clinical rotations in the Caribbean. So the first 2 years are labs and lectures and things of in classroom things. So the first 2 years I did in Grenada, and then went to England to do my last 2 years. So I finished up my last 2 years rotations. And I was mainly in Bath, England, but I rotated through London.
In Bath? Now, isn't that where... No, Leamington Spa was where Worsley was.
Worsley was in Leamington Spa, yeah, who I knew was part of this whole system, too. He came to visit at UCLA.
Now, how did that fit in?
Jack Worsley came to visit at UCLA.
Now, his stuff was so different than what you learned. What was that like for you?
Well, it's just another aspect, It's just like one more facet of this marvelous jewel, if you will. jewel of Chinese medicine with many facets.
I really think of it as a gem.
And so it was just another facet. And I respected that. I still do the 5-element people. Still know them, and I used a lot of their techniques, and I think they're wonderful. And Jack was, he was puffed up. He was a very, self-assured, let's say, person. And confident, yes, and but we got along well. So at any rate, I finished up in England. I was in Bath, and I was in Canterbury for a while, and I was in London at St. Pancras Hospital for a while. So I rotated through those hospitals.
Now, were you using any acupuncture in your medical training?
No. I promised the school I wasn't going to try and proselytize acupuncture. I wasn't going to try and promote it. I mean, I would see private people, on the side. And my wife, who was an acupuncturist as well, she was one of the first women acupuncturists. She would treat patients as well. But I had promised them I was not going to proselytize or do anything. Now, although they did call me back to do a couple of lectures on acupuncture, sort of to the students, just not classroom based, but extracurricular lectures. So I gave several lectures in Grenada about acupuncture, so just to familiarize the students.
Gave them an overview.
At any rate, so I finished up in England, and I came back, I did my residency. Then I got a residency at Kaiser Hospital in Riverside, California. Back to California. My parents were living out Beaumont, Banning area, and so it was near them, my parents at that time. And so I was at Kaiser Riverside, did an internship and then a residency in family practice out there. Again, I wasn't doing any acupuncture. I wasn't trying to proselytize or anything, but, I kept the roots of it going in my own practice.
Yes. But you really kept those practices separate at that point.
Yeah, I did. At that point, I had to, because you're in a Western track. Once I finished, I tried to get Kaiser to incorporate acupuncture, and I would have stayed with Kaiser.
Of course you did, because you're this integrative dude.
Bill, they weren't ready to do it at that time. Now they are, by the way.
What year was that where you were trying to get them to integrate it at first?
I was in residency in 91, 92, 93, something like that. Yeah.
So so it was a little bit earlier.
It was a little early for them. Now they have it integrated up, especially Kaiser in Northern California.
Yes, I know people working in them. Yeah.
So I finally finished in a little bit early, right? I finished in...
You were just a little bit early.
When did I finish? I think I finished 95 and then went back to California, went back to Los Angeles, rented a house, which we eventually bought, opened an office in Santa Monica, and then switched to another office on Federal and Wilshire, which is where I have an office to this day. I've been in the same building to this day. And I integrate both. I do acupuncture and herbs, and I also, while I was in London, became involved at the homeopathic hospital. I had learned homeopathy earlier, and I was on staff at the Royal London Homeopathic Hospital. I was in charge of the external program, which would get American physicians to study homeopathy in London. And so I was part of that. I initiated it, actually, and developed that program of American physicians studying in London.
You're kind of entrepreneurial not in a necessarily monetized way, but it's very interesting, the kind of vision that you have for these sorts of things.
Yeah. No, I didn't make any money at these things. Yeah. Well, again, medicine. Well, I wanted to be the doctor. And to be the doctor, you have to do the doctor.
Well, and what's fascinating.
You have to look like the doctor, not just externally, but internally as well. So you have to know. My attitude is you have to have all the tools. So one of the tools is acupuncture. One of the tools, Western medicine. One of the tools, homeopathy. One of the tools, herbal medicine. So as many tools as you can have, you have a better ability to treat your patients. That's kind of been my goal, is to have all of these abilities and
yes. Well, for many people that means learning a couple different techniques, but here you are learning not just different techniques, different medicines.
Again, I see it as all facets of what the medicine, the larger capital T, the medicine
capital M medicine.
And you know, they're all people have all these facets, and their treatments should have all these facets. Is kind of the way I look at it.
I like that. People have all these different facets. Their treatment should have all these different facets.
And you want to affect many different parts of your patient. And I do the best I can anyway with it. You know,
I mean, this is one of the things I love about the medicine.
Yes.
You know, Chinese medicine in particular. I mean, it's the only one I really know.
Well, that's the one that gave me my base, my root. See, so I try to come from that wellspring, and I learn other things. I might, do joint injections, but I'm also coming from, I do them at the acupuncture points, utilizing the energetic meridians. So, and I do that regularly. And I do some research as well. I don't know. We've just been talking with John Hubacher downstairs. We did a whole series of things at California Acupuncture College on Kirlian photography, which I'm very interested in as a way of actually photographing the chi, the energy of the body, and getting an actual photograph. Even after, we did this phantom leaf study where we'd cut off part of a leaf, take a Kirlian photograph, and show the part of the leaf that was cut away still there on an energetic imprint. Right.
Still has this energetic imprint. Yeah. Well, John is the guy to talk to about that.
Well, he and I were, I would say, originated, but we've been close buddies on it since he used to be in Los Angeles. He's now, and I regret the fact that he moved to Sacramento. Just from my point of view, he's doing well there, but I miss him being nearby. So I see him at these conferences, and we're trying to organize some research together that will push this forward onto the next level of actually being able to measure chi. To me, that's one of my next goals is to, electricity didn't make any progress until we had measurement apparatus. The Volta had dissimilar metals put together and frogs' legs jumping. And we knew there was electricity, but until we had measurement, we had ammeters and voltmeters, and showing that, actually measuring the electricity, then we could set up all this electric wonderful stuff that we have, like we're recording on right now. It was with having measurement apparatus. I'm trying to see whether we can get measurement apparatus, an actual physical measurement of the meridians themselves, and better able to document what we're doing.
Well, you kind of started with this.
Yeah. That was the original idea.
That was your original. Now, what about machines like the AccuGraph? There are machines that do measurement.
Well, there are machines, but my feeling is that the electricity of the body is different. The bioelectricity is different than this recording apparatus that we're working on. This has two plus minus elements, right? Negative, positive poles. The body I feel is tripartite. It's three measures, and it's what the yin-yang symbol looks like, right? It's the negative, it's the yin and the yang, and the curve in between, the sine wave curve in between, which is the neutralizing force, or as someone today mentioned it, neutral. I call it neutralizing. But at any rate, it's a tripartite measure in the body. And that's why I think it differs slightly from electromagnetic or electronics that we use. So I'm trying to see whether there's other way of incorporating this neutralizing force into our measurement apparatus. And we just came up with an idea today, John and I. We're always like spinning ideas at each other. And he, to me, more than me, but this was, he's really good.
He's truly a mad scientist.
Yeah, he is. I know. That's why I love working with him. And as I was complaining, I said, I'm more the doctor. You're the scientist there. You're the engineer. So I said, but I think, what if we used AI, artificial intelligence, to try and analyze some of the materials that we have and see if we can find another aspect of this, what I'm calling tripartite bioelectric system.
It's a good working hypothesis.
Right. That's what I'm trying to do. That chi is really tripartite rather than bipartite, bipolar, which is what our plus minus electricity does. I'm not criticizing it, but it's only one aspect of what is more of a biological system, which differs.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner, because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital chi, and that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of chi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
Stephen, this is really interesting. For so long, I thought of yin and yang, like yin negative, yang positive, light, dark, blah, blah, right? We know that binary difference. The thing that makes it biological and the thing that makes it interesting when you're practicing medicine is the relationship of how these things ease one into another. They actually blend in very curious ways.
To the other. That's right. That's right. That's why I call it neutralizing. It's that sine wave curve in the yin-yang symbol. It's a sine wave in frequency. We're well used to it. Like it's right there in front of us.
It's right there in front of us. And, we even look, I can look too from the point of view of like heaven, earth person, right? Or Jing Qi Shen. We often have these tripartite relationships that we talk. Yes.
That's right. Trigrams. What are the trigrams? All of these things. So there is this stuff in front of us, and I'm trying to see if I can bring it into a little bit more quantifiable form. I know we can measure it and pulses, and we take all these things, we measure all these things. I want to see if I can get it more quantifiable so that we can really, and maybe that's just silly. I sometimes I think, well, maybe this is the unknowable, where it can't be known. And, but I'm trying anyway.
It might be unknowable, but why? This is the thing I love about science, okay? A good scientist doesn't care if they get a yes or a no. A good scientist wants to look into something and find out. And whether it works or whether it doesn't, or whether their idea pans out or whether it doesn't, a good scientist, a real scientist, is like, that's cool. Now what? Where do we go from here?
Right. Where do we go from here? What and of course, good scientific articles often end with, well, we need more research to show whatever. In other words, it's always open-ended. We need more studies to, more defining.
Which is also the great thing about science. It's always open-ended. This is how we think it is. Something could come along and show us that it's different than what we thought.
Obtain the idea, by the way, that just as an aside here, that the points and meridians really don't exist. They're an artificial abstract. The points exist, but the connections between them are just connect the lines. And really the field goes outside the body and then comes back in. So the meridians themselves are an artifact, so that it's a field effect phenomenon, and the field like a magnetic field. So the magnetic lines are outside the magnet itself. They're not all in the magnet, but the lines go out. So it may, from large intestine 1, it may go outside and then come back to large intestine 4, and then come back again to, so that it's circulating. It's not running on a line that's kind of an artifact that we've put down just to make it easy to connect the dots. But the field itself,
or if you're looking from one perspective, you'll see it as a line, but it's actually more dimensional.
Right, that is flowing in and out and back and forth through the points. The points exist as transducers, is my feeling. Changes one form of energy to another so that you can either use a needle or massage or heat or lasers, whatever, electricity on a point, and it transduces it, it changes it into the bioelectric field of the body. And that's really the point. That's the nature of the points themselves, are transducers, changing one form of energy, again, needle, electric, laser, whatever is stimulating that point, into the body's electricity, the bioelectric chi, if you will. is transformed from this external stimulation. So again, a lot of this is theoretical and working
hypothesis.
Exactly right. I see it as working hypothesis. It's something I think about. John says it keeps him up at night. I said, I sleep really well, John. I'm sorry. But we're both involved in this kind of quest to move forward in some of these areas. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. How long have you been doing this now?
Well, I graduated from the Hong Kong school in 1972, August of 1972.
Yeah. So you sound, Stephen, as...
And I started in 69, and I knew more acupuncture in the 70s, and then was taken to Hong Kong in spring of 72. And my diploma has my picture on it. Dr. So's signature is, and I just looked at it the other day. It's, it hangs on your wall. I don't even look at it. And it happened to be August 30th, which was the day I was awarded this diploma. I said, it was August 30th that I said, looked up, wow. And it was 2024, and this was 97. That's 52 years.
Yeah. It's 52 years. So 52 years of this, and you're as lit up today as you were back then.
Oh, yeah. I'm a little slower than I was back then. A little grayer, a little slower.
Yeah, well, that goes with the territory.
But just as excited. I mean, I come here every year.
That goes with the territory.
To the symposium here, right? I sit right there. I try to absorb everything I can and all the new stuff. And sometimes
Yeah, all the new stuff.
Critique, as I was saying, I critiqued her not calling clients. I told her I'm old enough I could.
Well, it's the nature of humans to do that. So,
but I still come every year is what I'm saying.
I want to go back for a moment to Dr. So.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Lovely Dr. So.
I never had a chance to meet him. I think a lot of people have heard about him.
Yeah, he's the godfather of acupuncture in America, I think. He is the godfather. He was.
Well, if he's the godfather, that would make you the
godfather's son or something. Son of the godfather. I don't know.
Something like that. Son of a godfather. What was it about him that gave him that kind of charisma or that kind of capability that he had?
Well, first of all, he was very talented. He had a big heart. He really, really cared for patients, and he cared for teaching. He was an avid teacher. He would grab me, and say, "Oh, listen to this, this and this and this," and just start lecturing me as we're walking through the living room where we're living together, And he was also a wonderful cook. Most people don't know this. He would take anything we would gather and cook for us.
Oh, wow. He did the cooking. Dr. So did the cooking.
Every day. Oh, wow. Every day. He would cook himself. Dr. So did the cooking. And I would joke with him. I would say, listen, if we ever run out of food, I know you'll take the draperies off the wall and cook up a wonderful meal from it. He could take anything and turn it into this great meal. He was a great musician, by the way. People don't know this either. He played the piano, he played the organ, and he had other talents as well that were very well developed. In fact, he brought over with him a foot pedal organ that he would play on, and he would play religious songs. He was Christian.
That's quite a thing to schlep across the ocean.
Well, it was small. It was packaged and made in China, and so he had it shipped, from China. In fact, I still have one to this day. He got one for me as well, thinking I would learn. I don't have the musical talent, I'm afraid, but I still have one to this day. This foot pump organ that he brought two of them.
Now, I suspect he was also one of these Republican-era doctors.
Yes, he was. As he started school in 1939, before the Communist Revolution, and so he was teaching.
No, they were in the midst of war at that point.
Well, he was in Hong Kong, so he was protected, so he wasn't influenced. Now, Dr. Kim that I was talking about was in Canton, was in southern China, so he had to leave and didn't go through Hong Kong. But Dr. So was in Hong Kong, and he was, it was a British port, through all those years. So he was sheltered there. It was his offices were right on Nathan Road. If any of your people know Hong Kong, famous Nathan Road, right.
Famous Nathan Road. Yeah. So when he was teaching Did he talk about the 5 phases, or was he talking more about meridians and point functions? He was talking more about the meridians.
He was more talking about meridians. He wasn't focused on the 5 elements and the 5 phases so much. He was very meridian, very point oriented. He looked at it as a component of the electrophysiologic nervous system. He felt that it was a byproduct of the nervous system. I don't quite agree with that, but that was his thinking at that time. I think we've kind of evolved past that and looked at more energetic qualities, but he felt at that time that it was a nervous system functioning.
Okay. So let me ask this, because I don't understand electricity very well. I mean, I know our nerves are are an electrical system. How would the nerves, with their electrical capabilities, not be part of this field function that you're talking about?
Oh, it is. Oh, it definitely is. It definitely is. But he didn't see past that.
It is.
He didn't see anytime electricity moves through a wire, it sets up a field around it. This is measurable. This isn't just thought. But electricity moving through it sets up a field, and there's the right-hand rule and the left-hand rule as to which way the field circulates. So that was the way I pictured it in the early days. As electricity flows, it sets up a field around it. Now, I'm not so sure the field doesn't come first, and then the electricity comes. So that's one of the things I'm very interested in, too.
Ah, okay.
But he looked at it as I say, more of a neurological system and approached it from that point of view. So he was.
And what you're saying is there's a possibility the field comes first, the nerves show up later. I was listening to Steve Cohen the other day talking about in embryology that there's blood flowing, and where it flows, it actually creates vessels. And it's this flow that creates the vessel.
The vessel rather than the other way around, right. See, that's my attitude, is that when the sperm and the egg come together, it creates a field. And this field is what literally fleshes out the body. In other words, where do nerve cells know where to go? Where do liver cells know where to go? Where do spleen cells? It's because of this field effect phenomenon that by vibration organize the tissue. It's the field that organizes the tissue, not the other way around. Because sperm and egg don't have that much tissue. How do they gather tissue? And how does it go to the right place? Yeah, why does the liver cells go to the top of the head? Oh, or kidney cells go to, and of course mistakes are made, but 99.9% of the time, it knows exactly where to go. So kidney cells go on the kidney. Liver cells go to the liver. Nerve cells go here. Blood cells go here. Blood flow goes there.
So what's organizing this?
Field effect. The field around is a charge that started, and there's a field when the sperm hits the egg, and they must have some attraction, and the sperm burrows into the follicle and impregnates it, literally. And so it sets up a field that then attracts proteins and amino acids, which is what we're made of, physical stuff, and it attracts and organizes it. That's the organizing principle. It's how it knows where to go, as they say. How does the fetus start to form? It has to have some organizational capability. It isn't the fetus sets up the field sets up the fetus and attracts the right chemicals, tissue builders.
This is not your embryology 101.
Well, it could be, just with a slight shift in focus, I think. It almost could be. So it's not too far afield is what I'm hoping. We can incorporate it. I think my goal from the beginning is bring acupuncture kicking and screaming into the healthcare delivery system of the United States. Well, it should be used.
Tell me more about that. I mean, obviously you've been doing this forever.
Yeah, almost.
And look, when you started doing this, right, at UCLA, you took what was available and you did what you could do. There were particular challenges of that moment. There were particular opportunities, and you took good advantage of them. In this moment, 50 some odd years later, what do you see as some of the opportunities that we might grasp that we're currently just looking at and going, well, these are just a bunch of problems?
Well, that's a very good question, and I'm actively involved with that question. It's a question. I've been on the accreditation commission, accredited most of the schools on the west part of the country. I was on the certification commission, NCAAOM commission, helping certify. I was just recently on the acupuncture licensing board in Hawaii. I just finished my term there. So I've been involved in the organization of the profession, and I think that's a key issue right now. We're facing a crisis about the profession. It's slowly being stripped away from us, and I don't like that. The physical therapists have taken over dry needling. Naturopaths have taken over a lot of the aspects, especially herbal aspects of acupuncture. They're dispensing the herbs that or the purview, really, of acupuncture. Chiropractors doing the same.
There's many chiropractors, especially where I come from. A couple of months of training, they get to call themselves acupuncturists.
Right. So I feel, although some have disagreed with me, there's not enough job opportunities for acupuncturists coming out of schools. And so the Department of Education is getting involved with not granting student grants, student enrolled granting money is not being offered to schools where there's no sign of them getting a job afterwards and being able to repay the loan itself. So federally insured student loans are being cut down for that reason, because it's the schools themselves. And this started with other schools, by the way. Other schools do teaching other things. There was no place to get employment afterwards, and so they couldn't repay the loans. And so the Department of Education has cut down on those students.
So it's not just the acupuncture world.
Federally insured. It's not just acupuncture world, but it's being swept with that same broom. One of the brooms was the Trump College, by the way. I don't want to get political for the moment, but the Trump University was one of those that was strongly criticized for their graduates not being able to find in the game plan. Right. So we're being hit with that same, painted with that same brush
to get gainful employment. But now here's an interesting thing. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I know that when I went to acupuncture school, this is the mid-90s, early mid-90s. Seattle Institute of Oriental Medicine. Yeah, I was in like the second graduating class. They weren't even accredited when I went there.
I didn't accredit that school,
but it was obvious to me. It was 100% obvious to me that when I got out of school, there wasn't a job. There were very few jobs. I don't think there were any. We all knew that we're going to have to make it on our own. We're going to have to go into some kind of private practice, or build a business, or somehow get creative with creating our own livelihood.
Yeah. Well, that was the Wild West. It's not that easy anymore. I see students struggling. How do I rent an office? How do I set up a practice? And there are courses, of course, on this. I know people are teaching these courses. But I'm pushing for every hospital should have acupuncture staff. Every medical clinic should have hospital staff. Every university should have medical staff. Every medical school acupuncturist, right? So I think we have to broaden our approach and show ourselves to be the experts in this type of medicine and do the doctor. Exactly. So that's kind of where I'm putting. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that we ourselves as a profession haven't built the profession to the next level. We're licensed. Oh, well, that's enough. We're licensed. I can go and practice in my little office somewhere. We've got to be devoted to building this as a profession of acupuncture and acting like do the doctor, like looking at patients rather than clients, looking at us as doctors, looking at ourselves as practicing medicine, and bring it thus bring it into the healthcare delivery system so that hospice programs have acupuncturists available, right? Palliative care programs have acupuncturists available. There's, a huge range of possibilities out there that I want us to be able to move into. And, it's not going to be me. I'm the old guard, you and I are, but I want the young people to get the idea that they are the next branch on this profession. We built roots and we built a trunk maybe, but the branches still have to be organized out there, and they're the newest bud, if you will, on the tree.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, you've done your life's work. You're still involved, but the piece that you could build, you've built. The future belongs to the young, right? That's who gets to create it.
Yeah, and I can advise from an old guy point of view, but they've got to get out there and really develop these things and pound the pavement, so to speak, looking for job opportunities, gathering job opportunities, creating a situation where there's job opportunities, and build the profession, the next level of the profession. As I say, we got it started, we got it licensed. You're legal. No one's going to jail anymore. We've got it to a certain point, and here we are, talking at the Pacific Symposium. So we have symposiums, and but enough of it isn't focused on the profession itself. It's like, where do I put the needle? What type of herb do I use? What sort of approach do I take to dealing with children? All of these things. I want the profession itself to look at itself and build itself. I was just talking with the ASA, and that's, I think, going to be my next push, is to, since I've been on all the other commissions, be on the, see if I could volunteer for the American Society of Acupuncturists, because they're pushing for insurance reimbursement. That's another area. We've got to get, Medicare just has low back.
Well, they want to get into Medicare, have Medicare cover it.
Right now.
Yes, but couldn't it cover a lot more?
Thank you. Of course, it could, and that's the push. That's where ASA has lobbyists. NCAAOM does too. The commission, met with their lobbyists, and that's one thing that's important. The other thing is, I want everyone to be board certified. I don't need national certification. Yes, we do need nationals. All physicians are board certified somewhere in some certification commission.
Well, isn't that our NCCAOM?
Yeah, exactly. But many people refuse to join it. We have it set up.
Well, you have to join it in most states to get a license.
No, Hawaii don't have to, for instance. In California, you don't have to. Exactly.
Well, they have their own licensure. But most of the state, they're going to take the NCCOM, and if you move to that state and you haven't kept up your board certification, no license for you.
I know. I'm hoping that will continue to be enforced, but some of the old-timers haven't been, and it's spotty, is what I'm saying. Hawaii, no. California, no. California has its own, and I've fought with them through the years about this, especially school accreditation, that they accredit schools. They don't know anything about accrediting schools, but there's an accreditation commission that is well-versed. I was on it for a while, but I'm not anymore. But it's well-versed in accrediting schools and knows how to do it. Turn it over to them. National accreditation. No, we in California know how to do all these things.
Well, California does have its own thing. You got to admit that. There is that.
I know. I'm not in favor of it. Hey, join the rest of the country is my attitude. At any rate, I think it builds a better profession to have it more nationalized certification, accreditation on a much more national level where you're required to have this. You're required to have this. And, it's like all the other professions.
Like all the other professions do? Yeah. So I'm going to sound like a broken record. We started off the conversation, be the doctor. So there were some things that we have to do as a profession and as professionals that demonstrate our professionalism, for lack of a better word.
And that's my push right now.
And then we could join in with the... Now, okay, so here's the question.
That's my push now, and that helps us be part of the healthcare delivery system. To come back to also sounding like a broken record.
How much? But here's the question. How much do they actually want us?
It's mixed. It's mixed feelings about it. Some want us, some tolerate us, some don't want us. But that's how it was from the very beginning when we weren't licensed and my teacher was taken off in handcuffs. They didn't want us. My attitude is we drag it in, kicking and screaming. And that's what we did. And that's now I think we're at a crossroads now. That's why you're really emphasizing this. I think we're at a crossroads. We've got to take the next step, the next branch, the next level, the next push before we get stripped away, either from Department of Education.
And it's not going to be people like me that got their license, set up their shop, and had a good time just running my own practice.
I'm hoping people listening to this, the young people listening to this, will get inspired. They'll know where it comes from. They know it didn't spring from the head of Zeus, fully formed. It took a lot of time and effort to get to this level of licensing, starting from UCLA in a medical school under doctor's supervision. So all of a sudden we're out practicing and doing all these wonderful things. I'm hoping the young people realize that it's been a progressive a journey, and we'll push this journey on to the next level. Continue the journey. Continue walking the road. That's kind of my message at this point. Let's continue walking the road.
Yeah. You know, a positive thing in terms of acupuncture is there's so many other professions that are trying to get their hands on it. We don't like that. It's frustrating. It takes away from us, but it also says something about the acceptance of acupuncture in the world. So, you know, to your point, if we can do something to make it ours and let the world know that actually this belongs to Chinese medicine. This belongs to, you know, the people who study it in a deep way. It could be helpful.
Right. And you know, you're right. It does reflect the authenticity and the practicality and the realness of the medicine, the fact that it's penetrating these other areas. But I want us to be the holders of it. I really want us to be able to be the purveyors of it, you know, so that it becomes a real, you know, integrated profession of its own, like chiropractic is, or like physical therapy is, or podiatry is, or all of these other aspects of the program. I want us to be at the table.
Okay. Well, you've set a pretty good table for us, Stephen. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. This has really been interesting.
I rarely have the opportunity and the adventure of speaking like this. So thank you very much for providing that.
Well, that wraps up today's conversation with Stephen. He sure got more than he bargained for when he started with Tai Chi. He had the rare opportunity to learn from masterful practitioners, and he put those experiences and connections to good use. His efforts to create educational programs, advocate for licensure, and promote East Asian medicine underscores a commitment not just to the medicine, but to the community that it serves. His interest in medicine also helped to lay down a foundation that the rest of us would use to begin our journeys of learning and practice. Like so many of the early pioneers of our trade, they had no idea at the beginning of what they were to have a hand in creating. Beyond becoming a doctor, Stephen was part of the handful of people who helped to found the profession. If you enjoy these history conversations, you might want to go back and revisit August of 2023. That's when we kicked off the history series with a month of conversations that included John Meyerson, Yvonne Lau, Andy Ellis, and Dan Bensky. And listen in at the end of every month for another history series conversation. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Qiological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Qiological.